Well, that's not true. Sometimes there are dumb questions, but you can't treat them as dumb.
Yeah, you got to encourage them that way.
You support whatever a student asks. I mean, I've asked some really dumb questions, and so I'm not going to say that all questions are good, because my experience is some questions you wonder, what in the world is this coming from? And that's interesting.
Right.
When you get a student who asks a question and you can't figure out why in the world they ask it, that gives you the opportunity to explore a little bit about, well, what made you ask that? Or what were you thinking of when you asked that? Or some way of saying that doesn't come across as an attack or a challenge, but as an opportunity to help the student explore. And in that exploration, other students pay attention, because interaction, as you say, between two people is a lot more interesting to watch than one person up on stage or one person presenting.
What should faculty expect in terms of a relationship with a student who's just starting in college?
Well, I think that depends a lot on the faculty person's experience and, to a certain extent, their age. Younger faculty are much more likely, if they're attractive at all, either personally or in their looks, they're much more likely to have somebody fall in love with them. And you know, actually students get incredible crushes on instructors, and they drive you crazy. So, you know, my advice to all faculty is never give out your cell phone.
Oh.
Always say they can contact you through email, and be careful about that kind of situation with students. But in fact, once you get beyond that stage, let's say you hit 40,
Shoot.
then what you can do is you're much more in a situation where you should think of yourself as dealing with another adult and reaching out to another adult who is trying to do something that you know more about than they do. How would you help them? How would you help them in a way that enables them to pick up on their own and to practice what it is you're trying to teach them?
Okay. So Lee, one of the other things that we ask students to that are not used to, I presume not used to in high school, is to provide feedback at end of semester evaluations, and in courses we sometimes even do that in the middle. What can we expect of students in those evaluations?
Well, I think you have to think a bit. For example, if you do a midterm evaluation and the university assigns the evaluation at the end of the class, let me distinguish between the two of them. I think every teacher should do a midterm evaluation when there's still time to change course. But in the midterm evaluation, it's important not to ask much about how the teacher's doing, but to ask questions about what the student's doing. So in mine, they're open-ended questions. What am I learning in this course? How have I helped myself learn in this course? What is the biggest difficulty I've had in this course? What's getting in the way of my learning? How has the teacher helped me in this course? And then finally, what would I like to see changed about the course between now and the end of it?
Interesting perspective.
And what that does is it focuses it back on the student doing an evaluation or an assessment of themselves. It has nothing to do with grades, it's all anonymous, but it gives you valuable information on what you could do to help people. So often students say that the biggest difficulty is lack of time. I take that partly to be lack of organization, but we have students who work as well as go to school, particularly given sort of the quintile of the population that our students come from. It isn't the top 2 quintiles of the economic strata in the United States, and that means that many of them have to work part-time to make a go of it. If you're working part-time, that's going to really structure your life in a way that you try to fit your classes in around it. And that makes a huge difference to students. I have not come up with a perfect solution for this, although sometimes people who are working, that is enough discipline for them to give them discipline to study even if they don't feel like it.
Okay. But what about, for example, the quality of the comments that the students put in?
The quality of the comments on those are always fine in my experience, at least in the courses where I've used it. But if you go to the final evaluation that the university provides, where you have numerical scores and you have comments, on the numerical scores I would look really carefully at what they say about whether I've learned more in this course than comparable courses. I would look carefully at whether I would recommend this to a friend. But then when I read what they say, because these are anonymous and often brief, I would remember that they don't mean anything personally. I mean, anytime you have a student who writes an insult there, they're really talking about something that's bothering them, not just about you. And the tendency for new faculty is to take student comments really seriously and think that it's important that students like them. I would prefer students like me, but I would really prefer that they learn something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so you have to measure the comment. Is this a comment about what they're trying to say to me about something, or is this a comment about them? And lots of times things that they direct at you are really about them. They may be dissatisfied, you may not, it's too late to find out. The other thing is never give that evaluation too close to the final exam. Give it as soon as you can, as soon as your department tells you to. Usually that's within 10 days before the exam. The closer you are to exam time and giving the evaluation, the more that negative feelings about the exams are going to wash over into the evaluation. You won't get an evaluation of the class, you get an evaluation of how I feel a week before I
when I'm stressed about studying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Nobody thinks that's a proper assessment. You wouldn't give anybody an assessment when you were under that kind of pressure yourself. So there's ways of interpreting these things. The other thing to say is if you don't get any negative comments, something might be wrong. Because any really good teacher who makes a difference in somebody's intellectual life, in their thinking and in their mentality, should have somebody who really disagrees with them.
Mm-hmm.
Because they come across with passion.
I used to take the attitude of half the class is complaining that I'm going too slowly and half the class is complaining that I'm going too fast, and
Exactly.
I'm right on.
Exactly, yeah, right. That's a really good way to think about it. So of course you appreciate the students who really love the course and who think you're great, but you ought to also look at the other things. Sometimes somebody will say something that's just a remark that's really helpful. Like, if you could explain just a little bit more, don't read the PowerPoints too fast. Because I work with the junior faculty, I've seen a lot of these evaluations because they come to me when they're reappointed.
Right.
And so I know that students make comments that are about the problem they have in picking up. Now, if not everybody's saying you're going too fast, this may be a student who needs people who processes things more slowly. That's okay.
Right.
But it's always, you can probably never go too slow. Mm-hmm. Especially if you're talking about something that really is fascinating.
And you probably never repeat yourself too much either.
Exactly.
New faculty, and I was guilty of this, I wanted to get all the information I could to my students, but what I really needed to do was to go over things many different times and focus on what I really wanted them to learn, the essence of that class.
Yeah, I really like that. I think, well, if you're not teaching a science course or a math course or some course that builds in stair steps for the next course, my feeling is that in humanities and in some of the social sciences, teach less stuff, teach it better,
Right.
and go at it from several different angles, get the students involved in going at it. One of the young history professors here teaches early American history, which, because everybody has to take American history who didn't do very well in high school, it's not their favorite subject. In fact, history isn't anybody's favorite subject as far as I can tell, which is crazy. But anyway, she teaches early American history through dance and music, and actually has students line up and do the kinds of dances that people did in, before 1850 in the United States. Well, that's a fascinating way of getting them involved.
Right.
It's fun, and it lets you see concretely that you as a dancer now have a connection with dancers then, even if they use different steps than you do,
Okay.
and different
Lee,
music.
thank you very much for being on the show today.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you inviting me.
If you have any questions for Lee, you can post them on our fan site on Facebook by searching for Innovations in Education. I'm Graham Glynn, and I'm glad you joined us for another exciting episode of Innovations in Education.